Well, the chill is in the air, and it's not long before we eat our turkey, and Advent will be among us. And so the church year comes to an end, and a new one soon will begin. Time to put the old one away. Time to have us think about end things. Things like the end of the world, the second coming of Jesus as our judge, the final judgment. Traditionally, we refer to these things as the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. Malachi, the prophet of the first reading today, in the Protestant Bible is actually the last book of the Old Testament. He lived about 530 years before the time of Jesus. He came to be an active prophet after the people had returned from exile in Babylon, after Cyrus the Persian had sent Zerubbabel with these people and said, "Go and rebuild your temple." And so Malachi was the prophet who saw what was going on. Yes, it was wonderful they were rebuilding the temple, but they had lived for a number of years in a pagan country, and they had lost the enthusiasm of their faith. They were no longer following the law. There was a lot of intermarriage going on, marriage of pagans, and consequently their faith had been watered down. No longer were they being responsible. They were ignorant of the law. They were dishonest. A lot of corruption. And so Malachi foretells to them that if you don't get your act together and start practicing your faith like you're supposed to, it's going to be like a blazing oven with so much stubble. You will be just simply burnt up. Now Paul, who is speaking to the Thessalonians in the second reading today, was addressing a people who thought that Jesus should be returning at any moment. They were anticipating the second coming of Jesus like really, really soon. Well, since he's coming back, then why do we need to work? Why do we have to work so hard? In fact, that's what he was addressing. He says to them, you folks, you're acting like a bunch of busybodies. You're just minding other people's business. Take care of your own business and get back to work. Work quietly, eat your own food. Don't be eating other people's food. In other words, quit being a bunch of idiots and recognize that you still have to live your faith enthusiastically. You still have to make a living and take care of your families. He wasn't saying the Lord wasn't coming. He says you're using your time now as you wait for him to come in the wrong way. The gospel reading today is considered to be one of Jesus's, what we refer to as an apocalyptic discourse. It's an end of the world phenomenon. It's what he's saying is the truth of things. That things will all come to an end. But the apocalyptic piece of it is that God is in control of history. And this was a message that was needed very much by dispirited people, people who had no longer kind of like felt that, well, maybe he's not coming back, and all these sort of things, in their minds. These are the messages to people that says, what do we do about the persecutions that are going on now? What do we do about the hardships we've got? I mean, is this all worth it? And Jesus is basically saying, remain constant in your faith. See your difficulties and your sufferings as the birth pangs of the end times. For a true believer, therefore, the end of the world is not something so much to fear as to prepare for. Death, judgment, heaven, and hell is a prospect that should not be filled with fear by those who are faithful to what the Lord is asking us. Do not fear, have confidence. For us, this simply means preparing daily for our own death and judgment. This means living good and holy lives. This means using the sacraments and be willing to express our faith to our family members who aren't practicing. To remind them that their lives, it too will come to a point of death and judgment, and that the Lord will be asking them, how did you do? For us, unfortunately, we are plagued by a very terrible ailment. That ailment goes under the title of There's always enough time. There's always enough time. So our moral lives do not have any kind of urgency for us. Any kind of bad habits we have in our lives do not have any kind of urgency for us, because we're so busy taking care of the merely important that we can't give any energy to the really important. Soren Kierkegaard, who was a philosopher a Danish philosopher, told a parable one time about a theater. It says a group of people were in this theater. They were filled with people. And they were attending a beautiful, wonderful play. It was a variety show. And act after act came on the stage. And one act was better than the other. And the people just laughed and roared and clapped. And they were so enthused by the acting that was going on. They were just engrossed in it. Well, along comes the manager onto the stage, and he says that you need to leave the theater in an orderly fashion because the theater is on fire. And there was a pause, and everybody started laughing. They thought it was the next act. They thought it was the next drama that they were going to watch. And after they quit laughing, he said, "No, I'm serious. You've got to leave the theater. It's on fire." We leave in an orderly fashion. And they clapped again and smiled. And he gave up and left the stage, and the whole place burned down in a great conflagration. It's a parable to teach a lesson. It seems like that it is the same with us. We are so amused by what is going on and so concerned by what is happening in our lives that we find it impossible to take the message of the warning that Jesus has for us today with any kind of seriousness. That's kind of how it is with us, isn't it? I'd like to describe the gospel today in a kind of temple perspective. The temple that Jesus is talking about that's going to be torn down is the third temple. The first one was built by Solomon. He built it in about 7 years, and it lasted 370 years until Babylon conquered them and destroyed the temple. And then I mentioned about Malachi, and I said the people came back and they rebuilt the temple. That was the second one. And that second temple lasted until the time of the great King Herod that we hear about in the story of Jesus' birth. King Herod decided we can build a bigger temple. And so they tore down the old one and built a new one. It took him 84 years of building to make the temple that Jesus is talking about today. He literally created an esplanade 35 acres big. He created retaining walls on that mountain to fill in and create that flat surface of 35 acres. Colonnades surrounded that entire surface, and the temple was built in the middle. There were walkways underneath and passageways for pilgrims to come. It was huge. They say there were literally 18,000 workers working on that project at different times. I learned a word that I never knew before, and anybody here who's into construction, and especially masonry, probably have heard this word, may have used it. Ashlars. Ashlars. A-S-H-L-A-R. Ashlar refers to a stone that has been worked to create a block that's like a cube or a rectangular block with right angle sides. And then that stone is taken and made as part of the retaining wall. One of the ashlars that was used in the building of the retaining wall of this 35 acres measures 46 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet. It weighs 415 tons. How, in those days, they could move that into place and make it part of the retaining wall with no mortar whatsoever? The biggest rock used in the pyramid weighs 15 tons. So Herod really built something quite stupendous. And so when Jesus is talking about this temple and the stones being cast down, the people looked at him just like those people in the theater looking at the manager. They laughed at him. "You're crazy. How is this going to happen?" It's not going to happen. The reality of it is, it did happen. The temple was finished, and 6 years after it was finished, the Romans conquered Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, and it has never been rebuilt since. The stones, the colonnade, the temple itself, I don't know how they did it, but they destroyed it, and they rolled everything off that esplanade down into the valleys, and it actually raised the level of the valleys once it was filled in. So this is the temple that Jesus is talking about is going to be destroyed. So it's kind of the same thing with us when it comes to us really thinking about our death or the end of the world. We think, I'm not sure about this. Not sure I take this all that seriously. Our tendency, therefore, is to be like that crowd that heard Jesus. Our tendency is to be like those people in the parable of Kierkegaard. We avoid thinking about the last things. This past week, I think there were people in this country after the election of Donald Trump that thought it was the end of the world. I said, get a life. As I said, it's not the end of the world. Probably, on a joking matter, maybe Nebraskans felt that way last week after Ohio. But our culture tells us to enjoy yourselves. Don't worry about the bigger picture. And so I got two stories to end with to kind of put this in perspective. The first one has to do with football. A football player enjoys the game not by sitting on the sidelines and getting a tan. The football player enjoys the game by going out there and working as hard as he can to try to help his team win the game. And two things that he wants to be able to go to the locker room thinking is that I did my best that I could possibly do, and we won the game. Those are the two things a football player wants to be able to go back to the locker room thinking. No matter what, the fourth quarter is coming. The clock is ticking down. You know you worked really hard. You've got every possibility maybe of still winning the game. And you go out there and you win the game, and you are very, very happy that you won the game. Well, those are really good things, but it's not exactly like a football game. Our life is not quite like a football game. Because that football player could have put in all of his effort into that game, worked as hard as he can, and go back to the locker room knowing we lost the game. He did as much as he could, but he lost the game. They lost the game. He's disappointed. Jesus tells us that when it comes to our lives, there's the same thing. We come to that fourth quarter. We work really hard, but when we're on our way back to the proverbial locker room, we have won. For us, it's a matter of cooperating with Jesus and doing the best we can with our lives and trying to live good and holy lives, and we have won. We can't lose the game because he's already won it for us with his death and resurrection. Our job is just to cooperate with that and get plugged into it and change our lives accordingly so that we can say we're really following him, working our way. We will win. All we have to do is make sure we hook our little red wagon to Jesus. My last story comes from nature, and it has to do with the difficulties we have in life and what they're really all about. A gentleman was out walking and he found a cocoon. The cocoon was of an emperor moth. He took the cocoon home and he decided to watch to see this moth come out of this cocoon. And he saw a little crack start to develop on the cocoon as it started to wiggle. And he thought to myself, well, pretty soon this moth is going to come out of the cocoon. And pretty soon it stopped wiggling and there was just nothing happening. And so he became very impatient, and so he started to snip back a little bit of the cocoon so that the moth could get out. Well, the moth did come out, but its body was swollen and its wings were very small. And he thought that moth eventually would develop into the proper form of body plus bigger wings. And it didn't happen that way. Later on, he found out that the reason why he should not have helped that moth out of that cocoon is because simply by its growth inside that cocoon and by its pushing itself out of it through the small opening, it forced the liquid of its body into the wings, creating the larger wings and the smaller body. That's the way the difficulties are in life with us too. I think the Lord puts us here on earth to test us, to give us those difficulties. And eventually, because we work through them, and that's part of this working out our salvation, we work through them, we develop those wings that take us to heaven. So maybe our difficulties, maybe the problems we've got, maybe even the problems we have in this country right now, maybe all of those things have a reason. And throughout all of it, God will bring something better from it. That's just the way He works. So we have to listen to Him. And He says the rocks are going to be not on top of one another anymore. They're all going to be cast down. There's no doubt about that. There's a fourth quarter coming. The clock will click off, and it will be a zero someplace along